Ahoy, aspiring sea wolves, welcome aboard. I'm Commander Tyrael, and today we're diving into the most essential skill for any successful warship captain, Naval Gunnery. Whether you're a seasoned commander or just setting sail for the first time, mastering Naval Gunnery is the key to victory. In this tutorial, we're going to cover everything you need to know to land those crucial shots and outmaneuver your opponents. From battleships to cruisers and destroyers, we'll unlock the secrets of effective gunnery that apply to all ship classes. By the end of this video, you'll be better equipped to take on any naval engagement that comes your way. So hoist your flag, load your cannons, and let's embark on this journey to become a true naval commander. Before we set sight on the horizon, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell to stay updated for further videos. Now let's fire away! To be super effective, my controls are set up accordingly, firing with the left mouse button, ranging shot with the right mouse button. Turret ranging shot set to no, which means I get each individual gun, rather than per turret. Then you want to come down to naval target tracking, mouse button 4, target pointing, mouse button 5. This no longer functions, but I still use it. Then you've got your radar set to, I've got it set to my numpad, but you set it to whatever you need it to be set to. A lot of ships have radar now. Also, you want your mouse wheel set to distance correction. So this allows you to bring the targeting forward or back from the target. And I have it set here in miscellaneous as the mouse wheel up and down as well. Next up, come to your options. And come to Naval Battle Settings. Once in Naval Battle Settings, I have Shooting Without Alignment, Save the Firing Mode, Automatic Torpedo Forestall, Highlight Target Projectiles, in Arcade, Play the buzzer sound when projectile hits the water. That's very important in big gunfights. I would also turn off Follow Bullet Camera because it's nothing more than a gimmick or useful for very long range fights. Alright, now we are into battle. If you look down the bottom here, you'll see all these rings. These indicate each turret. When they're green, that means they're ready to fire. We've got the different types of ammunition available on board. The torpedoes, the torpedo count, our emergency smoke system, fire extinguisher, toolkit, unwatering, and a winch to tow other vessels with, as well as our toggle gunner targets. So at the moment, we're set to both, now to air, now to ships, and back to nothing. So it's all on us. The AI won't target for us. So next up, you'll see the little ring here. That denotes that the shells will impact where the ring hits, where the ring touches rather. So every time I fire, those shells will go on a flat trajectory to that target point. When I change to the scope, you'll notice that the target point is now changed to what looks to be a thumbtack. This thumbtack indicates there is some shell drop, even though it still looks very flat. And you press X there to target the nearest ship, which in this case is that little torpedo boat there to our starboard side. Click the right mouse button to fire a single ranging shot, and you can hold the right mouse button to cycle through all the available guns. This Moffat here has a very fast rate of fire, so the last turrets don't quite get a turn. So once that ripple's started, I'm holding the left mouse button to continue that fire. That's very cool, especially on the Moffat, very fast rate of fire. So we come over to our target now, and judging by that target pointer, those shells will impact exactly where it was pointing. And you can see now it's gone back to a hairpin, or a thumbtack. So let's find another target. Target him up. Wait for the rangefinder to set the point. The guns are now aligned. Fire. Very easy. Close range, not a worry. Very easy to hit anything, especially when you're stationary. But what happens when you start fighting at a distance? So at this distance, 4.8 kilometers, you can see that we have two readings. The reading that the ship is at, which is 4.8 kilometers, and what our guns are set to, where the convergence is. If we wait for the rangefinder, we now have a little marker here, and this indicates the center of mass for the ship. If you look at the ship in the target reticule, you'll notice that it is 8 degrees to the left and 8 degrees to the right. So that target point tells us that we can shoot anywhere 8 degrees either side of it and we still will hit that ship. So always measure the ship in the scope against the center of mass, what you can see, and that gives you a sort of a leeway of where you can shoot around this target pointer. So if we move 6 or 7 degrees to the left and fire, we are still going to hit this ship. So this is how you be more precise in where you're aiming on a ship. You use the rangefinder marker to set the center of the target. We fire to the other side, we should hit the rear turrets. Learning how to read the rangefinder is the biggest struggle. This rangefinder, now that it's targeted the ship, will update much quicker than when we first select it. So let's get into a bit of a reverse and see what we can do under move. Because when you fire your rounds from a ship at extremes distance, the shells have your momentum still attached to them. And so they won't exactly land where you pointed them. Once we've backed up enough, go to all ahead full. And once we're underway, I'll teach you the biggest secret, or the biggest method that will let you become super effective in any gunnery fight. This rangefinder, this scope, where's our aircraft? We'll just want to reset my targeting so we don't have a rangefinder reading. Once we're up to full speed, I'll teach you this little trick. Okay, so the rangefinder has a bunch of degrees on it. And when you fire, it doesn't always hit where the little triangle mark is. And that's because the shells now have your momentum attached. But what many people don't know is that rangefinder can be read. And so for every 2 degrees on that rangefinder equals to 10 kilometers an hour or 6 miles per hour. So when we're traveling at 70 kilometers per hour, we do some basic maths. 7 times 2 degrees equals 14 degrees. So if we hit 14 degrees on the rangefinder, just touching the ship there, these shells should connect. See, right there on the tip of the stern. From 14 degrees on the rangefinder. Try again. And that's why the rangefinder's center of mass is sitting so far out. So you are able to do this mathematical calculation quicker than your rangefinder can. So we'll find that target point, 14 degrees, fire. Our rangefinder hasn't set the range for us, but we're just estimating because we know our running speed. And sure enough, those shells are contacting at about 16 degrees. So it is all a little bit relative to your gun velocity, but generally that's the rule of thumb. 2.5 degrees, 10 kilometers. And so the length of this ship is roughly the same in the scope as the last destroyer. So I can comfortably just shoot where I know my shells will land on the scope. So I'm going to bring the ship to a slow 30 kilometers an hour. And that will bring the lead point to 3 times 2, which is about 6 degrees. And so my goal now is to be super precise, and I want to hit that turret there on the front. So I'm going to measure about 6 degrees from the lead point. 6 degrees out. Fire. And this should land on the turret. If we've measured our ship correctly in the scope, just before the turret. And so I could adjust that fire a slight amount and then take out the turret. And this is how you can be so effective in a gunnery fight, knowing how to adjust your fire on the fly. So that was right in line with the turret, but my distance wasn't quite correct. So what happens then, that's all good and well when you're fighting a stationary target or you're running parallel to them. But what happens when you're running at different angles to your foe? Well, let's find out. We're going to turn in a little bit here. I'm going to cut in about 30 degrees. We want to keep all of our guns still unmasked, which is the term used to keep when a turret is available for fire. It is unmasked. And so your goal is to try and keep your turrets safe by masking them and unmasking them using maneuvers. But that is a different topic. As old Moffat turns about into her correct angle, we're going to start making some shots out towards this target, which is now running towards us and not running away from us as much. I don't know if that makes sense, but it makes sense to me. So we're going up to full speed again. Full speed, and we'll fire off a shot. Now before, these were hitting at about 14 degrees. But for some reason, it's only hitting at about 8 degrees. And that has a lot to do with angles. So you've really got to imagine an imaginary line from the bow of the enemy ship and an imaginary line from the bow of your ship. And where they intersect is the angle that you're coming together. And depending on what that angle is how much it will affect the lead. And so in this case, we're about 30 degrees off our target. I would say 30 degrees, yeah, maybe 40 degrees. And as a result, that's having a mathematical effect on our lead. And the 40-degree approach means that we have to reduce our horizontal lead and increase our vertical lead. And so you can do this on the scope by looking down. And so I'm going to look down 2 degrees and look across 10 degrees. And see, I have then counted my lead and I'm making contact on that ship. I really hope that makes sense. One of the biggest things that's changed since I last made my reviews is the sea states and the effect that water has on vessels now. It's much more pronounced, especially in stormy weather. Here I've turned the wave action to maximum. Oh, it's not the highest sea state ever, but it's fairly rough. And this is something that you have to take into consideration when you're choosing a lineup. It's all well and good to choose a bunch of coastal vessels, but sometimes you get a map that is open water and stormy, and it makes your vessels completely null and void. And so as you can see here, this time around, our hairpin is refusing to stay still. And that's because there's so much pitching, rolling, and all sorts of stuff going on with the ship, and that's affecting our gun angles, the gun elevations. They have to constantly adjust to try and keep where we want to point them. And that's illustrated by that hairpin moving back and forward. So I'm going to go to a hard over port turn now to show you this in its most pronounced way. And you see how much that swings away from the center target point. When I go back to starboard, hard starboard, we're running with the wave action at the moment, so that's making it a little bit more gentle than it would be. But if we turn across the wave action, we will start rolling a lot, and that's even worse. And see, as I'm going through this hard starboard turn, there's about 4 degrees of deviation between my aiming point and where the estimation is. And so you have to use the hairpin at that point. In rough seas, you've got to trust that hairpin, but use the same principles that I applied before. That little triangle in the center, unfortunately, that's not where you're aiming. And once you get a head around that, so we're going to run against the waves now. We're going to let them hit us from the starboard side, and we're going to get lots of roll in the ship. And then here it's even more pronounced. At longer ranges, this makes the deviations worse. See, the hard turns in the rough seas is making this vessel very unstable. And so as your vessel gets bigger in size, it will become more stable, but that's not necessarily so, because some vessels have issues with top weight, some vessels were not designed for rough seas, and so that is a part of the consideration of playing War Thunder Naval in recent years. And so I'm using all the same principles of gunnery that I just taught you, but I'm having to adjust for the sea state, and I'm relying on that hairpin. And I know that I can do a lot of damage. I am zigging and zagging through the rough seas. I'm doing my best to dodge fire, and I'm still making contact with the enemy. And then finally, aircraft. Aircraft are a funny one because it depends on what. Oh, we've taken out Admiral Hipper with that crazy weavy fire. Anyway, back to HEVT are the single most powerful anti-aircraft weapon. I draw a line mentally from where the aircraft is heading to the very corner point where my rangefinder intersects together. So the vertical and horizontal on the left side. I draw a line between that and the 0 axis. Now, if you don't have any, I really don't know how to simplify it any more than that, so I am sorry. If someone can do that in the comments, if they understand that, please simplify it. And also, I'll show you here, we're coming in ahead. Target is directly ahead of us, and I'm going to use ripple fire. And have a look at how much the pitching and rolling of the ship is affecting that scatter shot. But if we fire single broadsides, when I feel like the aiming is correct, it's much more accurate. So you need to sort of decide whether ripple fire or broadside is for you to maximize your damage and accuracy. In a broadside engagement where the seas are pretty gentle, you can afford to just ripple fire away. And so I don't even feel like I need to illustrate this, but when you're fighting an enemy moving ship, if they're moving with you, you subtract their speed from your speed, and that's how you find the range. So for instance, if there's a if you think there's a 10 kilometer an hour difference, you shoot with 2 degrees of lead and you'll still hit them. If they're running against you, the opposite direction, you work out their speed in your head. If they're a destroyer, they usually run at 60 kilometers an hour. And so then you would add 12 degrees of lead plus your lead for your speed, and that gives you, say, 24 degrees of lead. I will show some gameplay, but I do have plenty of videos using destroyers. Feel free to watch those and you'll get a sense of how I'm shooting, how I can make those snapshots and then change targets. Now we're going to move on to damage models, because it's all well and good to hit things, but what should we hit? Well, each ship has a lot of vital components that you can destroy, obliterate, and detonate to make your enemies sink. There are 3 main ways to sink an enemy ship or destroy them. That is to destroy all the crew and make them combat ineffective, destroy their magazines and make them explode, or destroy their hull and make them sink. Basically, depending on what you're fighting, destroyers, you want to hit the ammo racks. They don't have any armor, you don't have to worry about any weak spots, you just need to find the squishy bits. Things like the radio station and the bridge, the enemy will lose control if they lose that. If the enemy loses all their fire directors, they won't have that rangefinder that we were using, the lead indicator. If they lose the fire control room, they lose control of all of their gunnery. Not firing, but in terms of range finding and estimation. Next up we have the engine room. If they get hit, generally causes a fire and a lot of crew damage. And the gear, and the machinery rooms, the gearboxes, the transmissions, etc. They do the same thing, but not as catastrophic. You just lose a lot more propulsion a lot quicker. And so as you move up in the ship classes, up to cruisers and battle cruisers and battleships, they'll start having armor over those vital places. So for instance, this battle cruiser, the Alaska, has 228 millimeters of armor that you have to deal with before you can get through to the squishy stuff. And so that's why I recommend to start at least destroyers. Learn how to shoot, learn where to shoot, and then rush up to cruisers and battleships. I don't recommend jumping into War Thunder Naval straight in a battleship, because it won't give you a sense of really what's going on and how to be majorly effective, and you'll be relying on RNG a lot. Now, to kill all the crew, it doesn't show this in the X-ray, but along the top deck of the ship, just below the deck, is where all the crew compartments are, and if you shoot armor piercing and high explosive into those areas, you will kill crew. If you take out everything on the superstructures, when they're repaired, they will draw crew from those compartments up into those damaged modules to repair them. So you've got to find balance between destroying the actual compartments themselves and destroying everything on the superstructure to kill the ship. When it comes to high explosive, you just got to sinking the ship, you just got to hit the water line until those compartments start flooding. Torpedoes, high explosive shells. Armor piercing shells are good for destroying the armor first. Alright, let's see some of this in action. You see that the hit point there was at 10 degrees, and that's because that ship was traveling at about 50 kilometers an hour. We're stationary, and fighting bow on is the single best way to learn gunnery. It takes your ship out of the equation for a lot of the fights, and you can concentrate on targeting the other ship. So I'm going to aim for this guy's guns while I wait for mine to repair. He was quite clever and he got my front guns. And there's a whole bunch of destroyers here. This is a very, very dangerous fight. So what should I do? Aim for the ammo racks, down low on the HMS Cadets. And they go up like a Roman candle. Next up is a Fletcher. Fletchers are hard to deal with because they have a fair amount of firepower with the American 5-inch guns. But in a bow-to-bow engagement, my battle class destroyer has much more firepower, so I switch to a ripple fire. And my goal here is to try and hit an ammo rack while he's not watching me. Now that he's seen me, I'm still using ripple fire to take out his weapons directly. Because of the range, you can see I just have to point the reticule at the target and it will generally hit. There's a little bit of deviation based on him moving and my moving, but that's where I want to shoot, that's where I want to hit. The bridge and his front turrets makes him just go into reverse spiral now. So he can show me his rear ammo rack, which is much easier to hit than the front one. And that fight is concluded. Alright, any more enemies to take down? Let's have a look. There's a Moffat that snuck past us, running at full speed. We're running backwards at 25. 70 minus 25 is 10. Using our mathematical equation, 70 kilometers an hour of his running speed, removing our running speed of 20 kilometers an hour, 10-degree lead. Akizuki. We just need to put them on fire. We're trying to go for a crew kill here, because these guys are less likely to explode from an ammo rack than an American destroyer. So my goal here is to take out his teeth. He's the one moving. I'm moving backwards. Or I'm about to move backwards. So I'm stabilizing my lead. I'm just aiming for the water line. Trying to get some cover. And it's important to stay aware of your surroundings when you're fighting, because when aircraft come in, it could end your fight there and then. You switch to HEVT, fire a volley. And again, to make sure he actually dies, and then we can go back to who we were fighting before. High explosive shells if you want to get through and make the compartments flood. Semi-armor piercing if you want to get through and destroy the components and the crew. You can kill all the crew on a ship with HE, but you have to do it via destroying everything on the superstructure, and it is a slower method. A few more shots, and this Akizuki will surrender. And you can see here I'm in a good rhythm of taking out his guns, hitting a module, taking out his guns, hitting a module. We've got another destroyer here. We should... There's lots of destroyers everywhere. We've got a Shiriatsu class destroyer. These guys are very squishy, so we would shoot him in the front and then shoot him in the back, trying to get either of the ammo racks. There we go, the Shiriatsu is down. IGN Udachi. Poi. So the fight looks like it's going to come to a conclusion any moment. But we need to do as much damage as possible. There we go. We're running at nearly full speed, so we used a 10-degree lead. That was 54 kilometers an hour. We're running at 50. He's running at 50. It's 20-degree lead, so we're aiming for the ammo rack. Just here below the rear turret. We're not going to get it, but our torpedo will get him. And so that was a nice 8 kills. But most of your engagements will be at 3 to 7 kilometers, especially for destroyers. So here we're fighting guys we can't see, and we're just guessing based on our own movements. And we've hit an ammo rack. And so what you do is you target an enemy, take a shot, see where it lands, and adjust your aim. We hit amidships here, so we're just slowly working our way back towards that ammo rack. No pressure whatsoever. We were running together, so there was very minimal lead at all. PT boat runs at about 60 to 70 kilometers an hour, so we want about 30 degrees lead to really hit him at full speed. But he's running very slow, and it only took 20. This guy is moving, we're moving. Looks like it's going to hit at about 20 degree lead, so we switch to SAP and fire at 20. And 20 degrees hits the ammo rack. We're running together. He looks like he's coming towards us. Slightly behind at about 6 degrees. We'll hit the rear ammo. But he was on low crew. Again, this guy's moving and we're moving away from him. But we need to unmask the front guns first, so we turn to starboard. Wait for the rangefinder. We're aiming for 10 degrees lead because he's moving backwards and we're barely moving with him. And it's just a matter of the dispersion. We are running away. There we go. And another connection. He's running with us. We're running away. He's still. We're running away. So we're going to go for a 6 degree lead here. It was more like 4. 4. 6. 2. And that's because we're making serpentine maneuver. So you've always got to be mindful of what your ship's doing too. Because if you're making maneuvers, that lead is constantly changing. And the more you practice, the better you will get at that. So when you're turning away from a ship, you have to increase or decrease your lead with your turn. And you'll notice that reflected in the rangefinder indicator. This target is running with us. We're about the same speed, so I just center mass shot him. Again, connection. Center mass shot. He's now turning away from us, so we need to decrease our lead to his stern. This guy's probably not moving, so we'll just go 10 degrees, just a guess. 10 degrees. He didn't look like he was moving. We've got hits. Keep that 10 degrees. We've got hits. And so far, 9 kills. Anyway, I think the video is getting a little bit long in tooth. I hope this has really nailed down gunnery for you, and if not, leave some questions in the comments below. Until next time, Commander Tyrael, out.